Massachusetts, we called. How about Maine? Yay, Maine! Anybody I missed? Okay, wow. So we got people from all over New England here practically. That's good. That's great. And Dan Norman, who's probably going to show up, one of my assistant directors, going to bring up the Connecticut crowd, so he's going to help us balance out. Hey, come on in, sit down, grab yourself a warm spot. All right. Oh, very good. Well, you really got this place rigged up with cameras. My goodness, Mitch, you guys went overboard. I feel like I should have had my professional PR team engage you guys early on. Yeah. All right. Who's going to Dayton, by the way? Anybody going to Dayton this year? Nita's going. Nobody else? This is the first live Dayton, I guess, in a long time, right? Should be interesting. Nice to see the amateur radio community kind of getting back to whatever the new normal is going to be. All right. Well, I could start early, but I'm sure someone will show up right at the last minute and be upset if I do that. So, tell you what, we're going to do some Q&A at the end, but we might as well take good use of time. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything you want to hear about on the ARRL? I'll try to steer my presentation in your direction. How many people have managed to successfully re-register with Personify in the new account? How many people think that was painless and easy to do? A few people did. That's a good sign. Some people had trouble. I got to be part of the ARRL tech support team while that was all going on. I probably fielded 50 emails the first week. So hopefully we got everybody through that okay. And Personify enables the ARRL to do a lot more things with customizing people's memberships. So as that all gets integrated fully into the rest of the website, you should begin to see more of those capabilities. You'll be able to get multiple print magazines and do other things with your membership as a result of Personify. And it's kind of the first step. It's kind of like, if you want to build a hot street car, the first thing you do is you put a better engine in the car, right? That's kind of the better engine in the car. It underpins a lot of things that we want to be able to do with a website as we modernize it to make it basically more like the 20th century. So that's all coming. All right, I'm going to go ahead. Guys, if you're okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think we got everybody here, and I can use the time. I've got till 10 to the hour, right? Yep. Okay, good. All right. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Fred Kemmerer, AB1OC. I'm the division director, new division director. Phil Temple's K9HI couldn't be here, unfortunately, but he's here in spirit at least. And I also want to introduce a couple of our assistant directors. Nita, you want to stand up and introduce yourself? Yep. And Rob, you want to introduce yourself? And yeah. You think I may have shut it off and messed it up? Looks like it's on. All right, can you hear me now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Check out. This is AB1OC, CQ. No, yes, maybe. I can also turn my microphone on here on the computer.
Test 1, 2.
That way. Let's try. Or we could switch microphones.
We can switch microphones. Let's try that instead.
All right.
We have backups. This being the first session today, this is where we figure out all the things.
It's good to be the beta test.
All the things that aren't working.
We'll let it run. That's working. Well, he's getting the audio in through his copy of Zoom. That's why I need to use the microphone.
And the screen.
Exactly. All right.
Capture it all.
All right, good, thank you. All right. I bet that works. Whoa. Okay, we're going to put this part way down here because if not, I'm going to Hopefully we'll, oh. All right, let's try that again. All right, so I'm going to do a couple things today. I'm going to give you an update on what's going on with the ARRL and headquarters. And for those of you who have been following the campaign we just went through, we made a lot of promises to make a difference inside the division. And I'm also going to tell you what we've done there. Okay, so let's get into it. One of the things that I know a lot of people are concerned about is open positions at headquarters. So I'm going to start there. Our CEO, David Minster, has been doing a good job of replacing the top tier of leaders, or filling positions, I should say, in the top tier of the ARRL organization. Wow, we're getting a lot of echo somewhere.
Volume up on your laptop.
You think that's it? All right, hold on.
Yeah. So turn that puppy down.
Okay, got it. All right. So Mike Walters, who was brought on to run field services, including the interface to clubs, has been around for about a year now. He's kind of the oldest player. Two additional hires. I've had the opportunity, by the way, to work pretty closely with all three of these folks. Josh Johnson, who's the new director of emergency management. He's kind of working on, along with some of the board committees, of revitalizing the ARRL's commitment to emergency communications. And Steve Goodgame, who's taken over the learning department, Teachers Institute, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm particularly excited about Steve because he's taking a new age approach and trying to position ARRL content on places like YouTube. He's revitalized a lot of the work in the school-facing programs, and just generally has I think, a pretty good forward-looking view of how the ARRL needs to promote itself and communicate with its members. Okay. I've been very fortunate to spend a lot of time with David personally and with these folks. And the way we're kind of doing this, when I get into the division piece, is I position our division as the petri dish, or one of them, for new ARRL programs. So we're trying things here on new ham development, on RFI and spectrum protection, on youth outreach and so on, that if they work, we hope to make ARRL national level programs. And if you all remember when I was here the last time campaigning, we talked about doing that. Most of that has been set in motion. And these folks are very much on board. Most of them have been working real closely with Rob, Anita, and other folks on my AD team to do exactly that. All right, so what's been going on with the ARRL? Well, I'm going to kind of go back through the last couple board meetings and talk about some of the stuff the board's been doing. As you know, there's been a look at the rules for several contests, including field day. One of the steps that happened is all of the ARRL contests for the so-called low power category, which for most of us is the normal power category, has been lowered from 150 watts to 100 watts. And that was done because most people who buy modern transmitters nowadays, unless they buy something really expensive, like an ICOM 7851 or an expensive Kenwood, only have 100 watts. So the group that works at this stuff felt like it was more fair to set that power category to represent the broad spectrum of the equipment that people had than the handful of people who could spend $5,000 or more on a transceiver. So that change was made pretty much across the board. We've been doing quite a bit of work on surveys around contests for both field day and VHF. Some of you may have received those surveys. They happened, I think, late last year or early in January. And a couple things came out of that. We are continuing to support operation from home stations, contacting other home stations in field day for this field day, and that may very well ultimately become a standing rule forever as we come out of COVID. So that second part hasn't been decided yet. But one of the things that doing that is, and much of our population of amateur radio operators are aging and increasingly have a hard time getting out in a tent or in a field day setting and participating. And so by allowing more activity from home stations, we feel like we're accommodating more of the community to participate in field day. Also, some of you may not have noticed this, but the ARRL launched a new contest called the ARRL Worldwide Digital Contest. A few years back, the ARRL RIDI contest added FT8, and like FT8 has a tendency to do, it pretty much took over the whole contest to the point there was very little RIDI anymore. And the folks that want to do RIDI were kind of disappointed by that. So we listened to that and said, okay, the RIDI contest is going back to being only RIDI, And we created a brand new contest, which will happen the first time in June for people who want to do FT8, FT4, and all the WSJTX modes, as well as PSK. Some interesting things about that, because those modes almost always exchange grid squares, the scoring in this contest will be distance spaced. So if you contact somebody really far away, based on the grid squares you exchange, you're going to get more points than if you contact your neighbor. Okay, so it's kind of an experiment in, maybe that's not a brand new type of contest, but a less common mode of making the contest more interesting. Many of you are probably aware of the Forest Service proposal. Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt you, but you're screen sharing your camera, not the actual slides. So.
All right.
So.
I don't know if this is going to work. You're going to have to see.
Should be that one down below, I think.
All right, hang on a minute.
I think that was the actual slides.
All right, I'm not sure what this is going to do. You're probably going to get my presentation view on Zoom, but that's probably the best I can do.
Right.
All right.
And that's what we want to see.
All right. The Farm Bill that was passed, I think in 2019, had a provision in it that the Forest Service used to say, okay, if you got an amateur radio site, a tower or something on public lands, we're going to charge you $1,500 a year for the privilege of leaving it there. Which of course is not good and not fair. Because unlike people who have cell towers and commercial installations, we don't have any way to raise any money to pay for this stuff. So the folks in Washington very quickly started lobbying the Forest Service, and we did a pretty good job of mobilizing people to comment. The first round of comments, there were like 600 or 700 comments from hams that were negative about what the Forest Service was doing. It was so intense, the Forest Service said, well, we better stop and do some more comments. So they opened a second round. And I haven't looked in there lately, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are probably another 500 or 600 cams that are pushing back. So we're hoping to have an exception in those fees instituted for amateur radio. People are working real hard on that. Okay. A few things from the board. Last July, the board created something called the Emergency Communications and Field Service Committee to put more of an emphasis on emergency communications in clubs. Where I fit into that committee is I'm not actually on it, but I signed up to run a subcommittee to look at how we can define a stronger future for traffic handling. And I've got a group of people. Marcia Ford here in New England is probably the name that you would know there. There's another gentleman from the southeast area or central area named Bud Hipsley that's involved. Josh Johnson from MCOM director at headquarters is involved. And we're trying to carve out a new role for NTS that will make it more relevant going forward, and then set the ARRL up to support that new role and make it happen. Okay? I'm also not on this chart. I've also been appointed to sit on a committee called the Administrative and Finance Committee in the ARRL. And what that committee does is it worries about the business of running the ARRL, how we drive additional membership, how we make sure that the ARRL stays financially whole, and all that kind of work. And I'm in charge of a group there that's looking at how we can drive additional membership and how we can raise the revenue profile from books and other things to help get the ARRL's financials on a stronger footing. So that's where I fit into this process so far. And particularly if you have comments on any of those issues or anything at all, please take the time, collar me while I'm here, send me an email, pick up the phone and call me, and let me know what you think. My style on doing this work is going to be to try to involve as many people as I can in whatever the outcomes are to make sure that we're reality-based. I no doubt will take some arrows for doing that, but I don't know how the hell you make good policy if you don't listen to the people that have to participate in it. Okay. All right, some other things. Youth licensing program. The FCC in their infinite wisdom decided that we would have, yeah, go ahead.
On revenue,
Yep.
I'm a heavy Amazon user, and I have my Amazon Smile program directed to the ARRL.
Good, very good. Thank you for doing that.
A few pennies of everything that I buy reaches you.
Right? 0.5%, I think, of everything you spend.
And if you were to get every ham in America that uses Amazon to do that.
It's a good idea. We're going to work on that one. I like that idea. It's a good idea. That's a good, well, it would certainly help. It's a good idea. We'll work on that one. All right, the FCC decided in their infinite wisdom that we should have to pay $35 for a license to do amateur radio. And the board, I think rightfully so, was very worried that that would produce an additional barrier for young people. So we did two things. One is we set up a program that's now in effect that if a person that's 18 years or under gets a new license, the ARRL will pay the $35 fee to the FCC for that person. It basically works on a voucher basis. The individual pays it. They submit a piece of paperwork to the VEC, and the VEC sends them a check for 35 bucks. The other thing we added on that is normally the VEC processing fee to have the ARRL do the work to get your license set up in the FCC database is $15. We also added on that if you are getting your first license or under 18, that fee will only be $5 now. So we basically underwrote about $40 of the cost of a young person to get their first license, to make sure that actually lowering the barriers financially they're not raising. Okay? We've had for a while, since last July, a lifetime membership program that was discounted for people 70 years or older, but you had to have 20 years of membership in the ARRL to qualify. I think it's longer than that. Phil just told me it's 20. 20, it's actually 20. Right. So the barrier to have all those years of membership basically excluded a lot of older folks who are just getting into amateur radio. We know a lot of people do that. When you get to like 50 or so, you start thinking a little bit about what you want to do in retirement or in the latter stages of your life. Maybe you look around for some new hobbies that you enjoy doing. And we felt like that was a prime candidate group, but unfortunately a lot of those folks aren't going to have that many years of membership in the league. Okay? So one of the things we did in January at the last board meetings, we removed that requirement to have any number of years of membership. So you still have to be 70 years or older to get the discount, but there's no requirement for how many years. And because it involves writing a fairly large check, we directed headquarters to come up with an installment program so people don't have to pay the money all at once to make it more accessible. Okay? Another thing that happened, has been going on for a while, is that our treasurer, Rick Niswander, or former treasurer, was doing a really good job of managing the ARRL's endowments. That's are things like large donations that people make to the league, estates that are donated to the ARRL, which is pretty common when people pass. Pretty substantial pile of funds, I think about $40 million. And our treasurer's, one of his main jobs has been to manage that money. He's done a great job with it. But what the board recognized was that we may not always have a treasurer who's so skilled to run a portfolio, investment portfolio like that. So we took steps to engage an external investment manager. We actually started out with like 12 people, narrowed it down, and at the board meeting, we all interviewed the final 3 and chose one. We're in the process of getting a contract written with that person, so I can't announce yet who it is in case the contract doesn't work out, but it probably will. And in the process, we also went through an interviewing process and chose a new treasurer to take Rick's place since he's retiring. And that person is John Sager, WJ7S. Somebody who I have very high respect for. He was the person that I supported for the job. And the reason I support him is not only does he have extensive experience in running nonprofit investment funds, but he's a hell of a good businessman. And quite frankly, one of the things the ARRL needs are more people who are thinking about operating the ARRL like a real business, both financially and in terms of how effective we are at delivering the services that we deliver. Right? All right. A few things going forward here. There's something called the Clean Signal Initiative that is about ready to roll out. This is about doing two things. One is working with manufacturers to make sure the signals that transmitters put on the air are clean and do not take excessive bandwidth or create noise on the bands. The FCC's requirement to have 43 dB down for harmonics is a pretty sloppy requirement. What that guarantees is you're not doing blatant things with interference to people that are nearby you on the bands. But if we don't meet higher standards than that, has anybody ever been in a contest on 40 meters on sideband on Friday night? You've seen the effects of bad transmitter performance. You know how you got all this interference and you can't hear anything else? Some of that's fundamental overload. But a lot of it is the fact that there's a lot of transmitters in that space together that are very noisy or have artifacts. that clutter up the band. So part of what the Clean Signal Initiative about is setting higher standards for that, having the lab at the league actually test and work to those standards and work with manufacturers who don't meet them to try to clean this up. The other element that's going on with CSI is training for hams on how to set their rigs so that their signals are clean on the air. How many people have seen an FT8 signal that has harmonics that go down half to 3/4 of the band? Anybody ever encounter that? Once or twice, right? What the other part of the Clean Signal Initiative is about is providing training for hams so that they understand how to set their equipment up so they have good, strong signals, but they don't have splattering or artifacts or generate interference on the bands, okay? So we're starting, the FCC, by the way, going on to the next one, has been largely shut down due to a combination of not having a chairperson and COVID lockdowns. And on top of it, just for fun, they moved to FCC headquarters, which took the few people that were coming in the offices and basically turned them off. That's starting to get cleared up. We have a new FCC chairperson in place. The office move is done. At least some of the folks at the FCC are starting to come back in the office on a rotating basis. So our counsel, David Seidel in DC, is hopeful that we'll begin to move some of the stuff that's been pending at the FCC, things like technician license upgrades and other things that we've had in front of them for literally years now. We'll finally start moving along, okay? Something that happened locally here in New Hampshire. Anybody familiar with New Hampshire House Bill 1644? Anybody heard of this? A few people have. Peter, I know, has because he helped me with it. This was, I think, a class of bills that we need to be very vigilant about. It's a so-called 5G exposure protection legislation. And I just included a little clip of the bill. This bill requires that telecommunications antennas, which it doesn't define, shall be placed at least 1,640 feet from any residentially zoned place. Guess what? That probably would ban every amateur radio antenna in New Hampshire if that bill had been passed. All of them. And that wasn't the worst of it. It also set up a registry that if you thought you were having health effects from a nearby transmitting antenna, again, or any antenna, you didn't have to necessarily prove it was anything, you could cite the address and location of that in a public registry anonymously that would be available to anybody who wanted to attack you for having that antenna. Other than that, it was a great piece of legislation. So fortunately, one of the folks in New Hampshire picked up that this was going to hearing to get ready for a vote to be passed. And we said, Peter did some great work to alert a lot of hams here in New Hampshire. I did some work as well, and we had a pretty nice turnout for comments in the hearing, and the bill got sent back for further study. So we at least temporarily stopped it, okay? But so why am I telling you about this? It's very, very important that when you see things in your local papers or hear about legislation like this, that you let Peter know and you let me know, because the best mechanism we have to stop this legislation is to catch it early before people are actually voting on it to pass it and mobilize hams to respond appropriately and get the stuff stopped, just like we did here. Now, I've also had a meeting with all of the folks in the sections. Each section manager, Peter's one, has something called a state government liaison, whose job it is to monitor and talk to state senators and House representatives in their state and keep an eye open for this kind of stuff. So we also got everybody together and kind of put them on alert that these classes of bills, we think there's some pending in Connecticut and Massachusetts that are probably a year or two behind this legislation. One very prominent Connecticut senator said, we really need a bill just like this in Connecticut. Okay, so it's very, very important that you all be vigilant as well. And if you see this kind of stuff going on, you let Peter know, you let me know, or you let your section manager know so that we can try and help you deal with it. Okay? And then lastly, something I'm very proud of is the ARRL Foundation Club Grant Program. For those of you who know my background, I'm a club guy. I spent the last 7 years building a pretty decent amateur radio club here in Nashua. Some of you may have been at one of the expositions that club did here before COVID. It was actually in this very room where we reached out to a whole bunch of young people and tried to get them interested in amateur radio. I think clubs are the backbone of this hobby. And quite frankly, one of the things I've learned or maybe confirmed is that while there are a lot of great people in Newington at headquarters, and a lot of great people in the sections. There are not enough of them to solve amateur radio's problems if the people that are hams do not get engaged and help with that process. And so having an amateur radio clubs are one of the best ways, not the only way, but one of the best ways that the ARRL can reach the people who can do this. So just about the time I came on, the ARRL Foundation, which you would normally think of as the group that awards the scholarships for people who want to go to college, young people who want to get ARRL scholarships, got a $500,000 grant from a West Coast operation called ARDC, who has literally tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to give out for amateur radio projects, with a charter to say, ARRL, you know about clubs, go give this $500,000 to clubs, and you have by the end of this year to do it. So one of my first projects of director was to get involved and actually take a lead role in the group that defined the club grant program and how it's going to work. We're going to roll this out next Wednesday night via webinar, May 4th at 8 o'clock. You should have gotten an email from me with the link. You should have also seen it in the ARRL newsletter that just went out last night of how to register. These grants will be made available up to $25,000 for radio clubs that want to do things like build stations, do emergency communications work, deal with RFI interference problems, bring new hams in the hobby. And the main criteria for getting these grants are you need to be able to not only take the money and benefit your club, but you have to use it to bring more people in the hobby, provide training, ham development, youth outreach, and those kinds of things. So we're trying to use this program to try to get clubs to help us attack some of the fundamental problems that are holding the hobby back and holding, therefore, the ARRL back. Okay? Yeah.
Back to the
Yep. No, surprisingly, they were largely invisible. Okay, and we're still wondering a little bit why that was. Well, you would have thought so, wouldn't you? Now, part of this is cell towers maybe don't get zoned in residential areas as much as you might think. Well, a lot of those are in commercially zoned places. So part of what probably was going on there is they might have felt like that the way the law was written would not have affected them so directly. The other thing is it was written in such a way that if you had an existing antenna installation, it would have probably left it alone. And of course, the way cell towers work in most industries is there are companies who own the towers and lease the antenna space out. So the impact, and this is a great example of maybe well-meaning legislation that has unintended consequences, actually would have hurt the very people that probably would have affected the real problem they were trying to solve the least. It was a bad bill. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Can you stop sharing screen sharing? We're having problems with the slides not advancing and things like that. So I think we're going to do a workaround and I'll just handle it over here in front of.
All right.
Get the bug to work out of it. Thank you.
Hold on a minute. All right. Onward and upward. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we're still there. Good. If I can just advance my slides. All right. So just a little bit of follow on the bill thing. Our Washington Council is telling us we should expect to see this type of 5G legislation all over the United States. And as I said before, we already have seen examples of it. The New Hampshire bill was done in two steps, and there's probably a third one had this one worked. The first one was 2 years ago, New Hampshire passed a bill to have experts study the 5G exposure problem. That bill is pending in Massachusetts right now. What happened there was that the so-called experts, mostly university people and a handful of physicians, wrote all kinds of papers saying this 5G frequencies will. Can you please just leave the charts up so I can do this? Thank you. All right. Those people wrote expert opinions that justified the bill that we just defeated, or at least slowed down. What we believe the registry is about is a third case to further ban other types of antennas once there's enough public protest that says everybody's getting sick from transmit antennas in residential areas. So there's a plan here. So what I would say for those of you in Massachusetts and Connecticut where those first stage bills are pending, Please be on top of those as you see them progressing through hearings. Let us know. The earlier we deal with these things in the process, the easier it is to control the situation. All right. Club grant program, I kind of covered this one already. There will be a webinar next Wednesday night. Mike Walters and I will be doing the webinar to explain how this is all going to work. If you're interested in a club grant, I'll be around all weekend long. Come talk to me and I'll kind of get you started. All right, now for the good news. Our division is really doing pretty good in terms of recognitions. We've had 2 of the 3 cover plaques awarded in the first quarter. I don't get anything to do with this, but I'm really happy that I get to present these things because it's fun. Joe Reisert for his article on 12 and 17 meter antennas, which was, if you haven't read that and you're into Yagis, definitely take a look at the article. It's excellent. Joe was, I believe, an engineer for Comet antennas at one point in time, so he's a real guru on this kind of stuff. Cushcraft, I'm sorry, right. And also Bob Rose and Bob Glorioso at PART, who are well noted for their wire beam antenna articles, actually won a second cover plaque in March for a 20 meter phased dipole beam. So, you know, a lot of good technical contributions coming from people in the division. We should be proud of that. I certainly am. All right, another thing that we've been doing a lot of, and this is a pitch for you all. Many folks probably, I don't think this has been done too much in recent years, but the ARRL board has a program to recognize clubs that have been long affiliated with the ARRL. And we've been pretty busy catching up. You can see we've done 4 of these so far. It actually takes a motion of the full board of directors of the ARRL to do this. And my hat's off to Phil Teppels, K9HR, our vice director, because he is a pro at writing these motions. And you can see we've done 2 in Maine, Ellsworth and Androscoggin, 1 here in Massachusetts that we presented so far, Kemmerer, 1 in Rhode Island for the PRA, and we have 1 coming up for the Meriden Amateur Radio Club here. I think they're going to actually have a pretty big event in June where we're going to present this plaque. So if you're involved in a club that's been around a long time, you might want to look at how long you've been ARRL affiliated. If it's, say, more than 50 years, let Phil and I know, and we'll be more than honored to do this for you. It's a nice thing to have in your clubhouse. It also usually, in writing the motion, we do a little bit of a history study about all the great things that the club has done, and we write that into the motion. So it's a chance for you all to let your members know about some of the good things that your group has been doing over a long period of time. All right, one of the things I promised to do was to make the ARRL a better communicator and, most importantly, a better listener to what you all think. Okay, so what did we actually do? We said we would have 4 cabinet meetings a year. Cabinets are typically club presidents, section managers, key people on the field staff teams, and other hams who are leaders in the division that help advise me and Phil and the assistant directors on sort of what our priorities should be at a high level. We had the first one a week after I took office. We just held the second one. We're on track to do the other 2, so that's basically implemented. The other thing that's unique about our cabinet meetings is that we bring headquarters leaders. Remember I talked about how we were trying to get the headquarters people to look at us as the Petri dish? Josh Johnson, Steve Goodgame, Mike Walters have all been presenters and participants in our cabinet meetings so that they hear firsthand, not just from me, but from the people who are doing the heavy lifting to do leadership roles in the division. And that makes that whole process a lot more effective because that's how you build influence. The second thing I'm a big fan of is that saying that it's nice that you have a cabinet, but if you don't listen to the people you're trying to serve, you put your head where the sun never shines. And so I did a couple town halls during the campaign. I did the first one. I think we did that, in February or March? I can't remember which. We had about 200 people attend, I think, roughly. And that was a couple hours where we gave a similar update, and then we spent time taking, I think, 40 or 50 questions and comments from people. Every single one of those turned into action items, and Phil, myself, and our assistant directors meet every week, and we work those action items to ground. That's what responsive communications looks like, folks. You say something to us in a meeting. If we can do anything about it, you should expect us to do so. That's what this needs to look like going forward. All right, now we can't always do everything that everybody wants, but we don't dismiss anything that we can do just because we don't feel like doing it. Everything gets attention and gets thought put into it, just like what you just gave me. Club meeting attendance. Every one of us is signed up to attend at least 6 club meetings in a quarter. How many of you are in amateur radio clubs? How many people have seen me or one of my assistant directors at a meeting? No, we're not doing good enough yet. All those hands should have stayed up. Okay? Again, clubs are the backbone of implementing a lot of what we're trying to do here. And if we don't spend time with you all and have that relationship and be listening, I don't know how in the hell we execute. Hamfest, very important. You can see what we've done so far. If you have a Hamfest and you'd like to have us here, I'm going to move away from where I am. Let us know and we'll try to get it covered for you. And then last, on Hamfest, I've seen some situations where Hamfests have collided, smaller ones with bigger ones, and created some heartbreak. So I would recommend to all of you that you register your Hamfest with the ARRL, and I've specifically talked to Steve Ewald that before you bring any of these for me, because I have to kind of sprinkle my director holy water on them, which I do without ever thinking, to check and see if there's any conflicts that you know about and advise the people that are applying of the conflicts so they know what's going on. You could, by the way, register your Hamfest up to 2 years in advance. So if you're doing some advanced punting on your dates and you're worried about colliding with somebody else's thing, you might want to do that early so Steve can help you avoid those problems. Right? All right. Some things that I'd like to ask you to consider. We have been using, I have a division emailing list. Peter has one for the sections. All your other section managers, for those of you who aren't in New Hampshire, have them too. These are the main ways that we can personally communicate with you when something like those nasty bills come up and we need you to get on a website and express your displeasure. But if you don't sign up to be on our email list, we don't have a good way to do that. So if you're not already on your section email list and the division list, please take that new personified login you have and go to your member page and opt in for the communications for division and section news. I promise you we will use those emails selectively. I've only used mine, I think, 3 times. I've used it to announce the town hall. Actually, 4 times. I used it to announce the House bill that we talked about. I recently used it to share our division newsletter, the New England Beacon, so hopefully you all saw that. And I used it to let you know how to register for the club grant webinar next Wednesday night. So I'm not going to use it to campaign or do trivial stuff, but it is my best way to reach all the ARRL members in the division when something reasonably important or valuable to you is going on. So if you haven't already signed up, please do that. We also have a very active division website, thanks to our vice director, Phil, and all of the assistant directors, anydiv.arrl.org. I don't think there's hardly a day goes by that some new piece of information about what's going on is posted there. If you want to subscribe and find out about what's on there, you can go on the website and put your email address in. For those of you who have been involved with amateur radio blogs, you're probably already used to doing this. And you'll get a short email with a link every time we publish something new there. So that represents the bulk of the communications program that we've implemented. And hopefully this will be an improvement, especially for us hearing from you. All right, I have already mentioned the assistant directors, and Dan now is here. Dan, do you want to stand up briefly and introduce yourself? Okay. So this is how the Petri dish happens, okay? What I did here is I took 4 of the top things that I heard about when I was campaigning and appointed these folks, and Corey Gullib, who's a little too far away to make it here, he's up in Maine, to be in charge of bringing people in the division that care about emergency communication and public service, care about protecting our bands and dealing with RFI, care about bringing new people into amateur radio and getting them active, or care about using amateur radio as a STEM outreach and learning tool for young people, and set these 4 up to be in charge of those activities. They have formed fairly sizable working teams. They all have groups IO, and I'll show you that information in a minute. and are holding monthly meetings with people who are involved in these activities to share ideas, to give us a mechanism to publicize some of the good work that's already going on, and to build new programs to actually solve these problems. Headquarters people, those three folks, Mike, Steve, and Josh, are active participants in these groups. Ed Hare's an active participant, for example, in Rob's group in the lab of the league for RFI. And so what we're trying to do is implement programs that will actually solve these problems, scale them up, figure out how to make them work, and then ultimately give them back to the headquarters people and say, here, make this a national program. Okay? That's the Petri dish concept. And so with that, if you'd like to participate, here's some information on the email addresses and the group's IOs that communicate what's going on with these people. We have up on, in the, what's the building we're in there, Peter? It's Commercial 3, one of the log cabin buildings at the top corner. Peter has a very nice table, and on that table you will see this chart. So if you'd like to join one or more of these groups, we'd love to have you help us. And, you know, there's great work going on in all these different areas. And that's probably all I have time to really say here. But if you have questions, in which we're going to get to in a minute, about what these folks are doing, we'll be happy to take those. All right, and I went backwards instead of forwards. And speak of the devil, that's it. Yes?
So when you talk about spectrum protection and things like that, you know, I read a news story recently where one of the satellites SpaceX put up was a design to monitor radio spectrum usage.
Yep, I saw that.
And, you know, as a ham, I have a lot of repeaters programmed into my radio, and we seem to have a lot of dead repeaters and things like that. Like my local repeater, Quincy, Mass. I mean, that's a hot machine. And the near 900 network, that's a hot 900 operation. But, you know, it seems to me like there are a lot of things that could be done to protect our spectrum by using it.
So I'm going to give Rob the floor here a little bit and tell you what he's doing, but let me just make a comment on that satellite thing. You know what that's really about? Satellite operators need 5 and 10 gigahertz. And what they're out to do is they're out to approve or not using it to the FCC. That's what that whole deal is about. Now with that, Rob, why don't you talk a little bit about how we're going to start using it?
Okay. There's also another group in this set called New England and we have a group of people in spectrum protection use that actually was interested specifically in mesh networking. And I don't know how familiar you are with mesh networking.
I've heard of it.
Okay. But basically, it uses frequencies at 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz, actually 900 also, and the software that sets up the routers and stuff configurable is using 900 megahertz and up in the M bands to link routers together. A lot of them are made by Ubiquiti, and there are some older ones as well that are on 2.4, which were available on eBay for like $10 a piece, which usually got used. And these routers can be used in emergencies, and they can be used actually as fixed access. And when you want to add one, as you know, it automatically communicates with all the others and reconfigures them all to talk to one another. And then you can downlink at 2.4 to a Wi-Fi connection to the laptop. So the idea there being is we're trying to utilize the spectrum, especially above 1 gigahertz where the commercial interest is, and use it in ways that take advantage of all the usual internet software that's available for chat, for video, for telephony, telephone, okay? All of that, and use that as an emergency facility so that if the commercial internet goes down, as it's been known to happen from time to time, we will have a facility that we can use to bypass the down section, and restore internet's capability in an emergency to the affected area.
So this does a couple things. First of all, it gets some real activity in the bands,
Right.
which are critical if we're going to hold on to them. Okay, that's the number one reason we're doing this. Now, there are some pretty big networks. There's a large one in Maine, and I know there's a group up there that's looking for a $25,000 grant to expand that network significantly. So the idea is to use the Arden system and this technology to get meaningful, constant activity in these bands. So, and that makes it much, much harder for the folks like the satellite operators who would like to have that stuff become commercial to make the case. That's what we're trying to do.
So there's a network that's being set up, for example, of 900 megahertz, using something called LoRa devices. And he's going to put these nodes inside birdhouses. Real birdhouses.
All right.
And they're very inexpensive, 100 milliwatt, but they form a very effective mesh for emergency communication. So that's an example. Another example here in New Hampshire, Maine, is for the first time just 2 days ago, we succeeded in covering between a mesh network in Maine and a mesh network in New Hampshire.
So the ultimate goal is to build a New England-wide network. That's what we're trying to do here. Okay, and if that works, that'll be a showcase for the rest of the United States. There's another one out west that goes from Wyoming to, I believe, New Mexico.
Right.
It's also a very large one. So we're not breaking new ground here. But again, if we're going to keep these bands, we have to use them because commercially, they're right in the center of the sweet spot and they are worth billions commercially. Okay. So if you're interested in this stuff, and I bet there are a few people in here that are, spend some time with Rob while he's here, and he will bend your ear infinitely on how you can get involved and help. Other questions and concerns? I want to give equal time to all the issues here. Yeah, Dale.
Well, I'm giving a talk at one about VHF content with the emphasis on microwaves, and I brought some gear, but you know, just recently we lost 3456, which is a key weak signal frequency. So we're all moving down to 3400. But I'm putting a lot of work into this, and I'm thinking, what if we lose that without, you know, who knows what's going to happen? I don't feel secure. It's like a guard band, I suppose, right now.
I think you got to have a mindset of the bands from 900 up, use it or lose it.
I'm using it.
All right, but we need to remember what we heard about a minute ago, how people that would like to have this commercial set of monitoring systems to give data, and they're not getting that just because they're nice people. They're getting that so they go to the FCC and say, see, you've got all this important spectrum that are tied up with amateur radio operators and they do not use it.
Well, I'm here for the very reason that I'm trying to.
Okay, so you may want to get involved, Dale, with what Rob is doing and see if you can try and help, because what we're doing here is and this is kind of part and parcel of what the ADs are about. We're taking good stuff that's in spots all over the division. We're trying to scale it up, build bigger programs, make it visible so that the folks that want to use this stuff can take advantage of it. And then most importantly, as we get traction at a New England level, give it back to the league and say, okay, now here, go do this league and see if you can't fix this problem nationwide. Now that's not always going to work, and it's not a replacement for what the ARRL does. It's a supplement, okay? It's a way where we can maybe go faster, get to the right answers in some cases a little quicker, experiment with things that probably are not going to work and fail without having a whole national program that fails, which the ARRL's been known to do from time to time, right? And so we're not trying to replace what headquarters are doing. We're trying to supplement that. And we're also making sure that the people at headquarters who own this stuff are integrally involved so that if they're going here and we're going off a right turn somewhere else, it's going to make their job harder. We know that, and we can come together. That's what this whole program's about. Other questions or comments? I'm probably going to turn into a pumpkin here in about 5 minutes, so anything at all? Anything at all? Nope. How about go ahead, John.
I'm not sure who or where the decision was made, but Ham Expo in August is going to be New England and Princeton.
Correct.
And I think that's wonderful. I'm getting more, two adjacent divisions together, sharing ideas. the same thing that we're doing in New England, doing
Yeah.
two divisions at the same time. I think it's great.
Well, thanks for saying that. I am on the Ham Exposition Board, by the way. That was brought by Mike Raisbeck, that idea. He's the one that gets the credit for initiating that, okay? And I think in the long run, we would like to see Ham Exposition become a national level deal like Hamcation and PacificCon and some of the others, and Huntsville. That's where we're trying to go with it. And part of that is a lot about the vendors. You know, the vendor community has really scaled back in their investment, especially the big ones, the transceiver people, Kenwood, ICOM, Yaesu, all those people. And it's very hard to attract those folks for anything other than national level stuff. And of course, a lot of the reason that people come to Hamfest, at least certain types of Hamfest, maybe not so much this one here, we create our own content pretty effectively. But come to certain types of Hamfest to see those people and talk with them and see what the latest stuff is and all that. If we can't scale the operation up, it's getting increasingly hard to get those people to show up. And that's kind of what that's all about. By the way, is anybody here a traffic handler? Anybody trafficking yet? I know you guys are. So let me just say a little bit, since we have time and not too many questions about what's going on there. So some of you probably don't even know that people still do traffic handling, which is a real shame. One of the things I've learned in this process is, did you know that unlike any other branch of emergency communications, most traffic handlers practice their art 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They are some of the most well-trained and disciplined people you will ever find in emergency communications, okay? Second point, what's the probability that we're going to have a regional or a nationwide cyber attack in the next 5 years? How many people think that's likely to happen? We're going to have the internet if that happens? Maybe not. We're going to have cell phones if that happens? Probably not. So would it be nice if we had a modern traffic handling system that could step in with people like the Red Cross and FEMA and others and replace that lost infrastructure when we don't have it? Right? That's the vision for the future of traffic handling, or part of it. But it doesn't mean all of the goodwill traffic that traffic handlers handle today goes away. But what we need to continue to attract people in traffic handling, and most importantly, make what the people who spend those 365 days a year, literally every night of the week, doing that stuff, is to give them a meaningful thing to do with the time and the training they invest in. That's what we're trying to do with that effort. And I think we're going to get there. I really do. I really do. And by the way, I've been very active in generating traffic. We did well. Thank you for all the 200 town hall attendees. We're about to drop a message-gram to all the club presidents about the ARRL Club Grant webinar that's going on next Wednesday. Now, you guys got to get this thing delivered for me before next Wednesday, otherwise it doesn't mean anything. So there's a little bit of a performance challenge for you, all right? But, you know, lots of folks tend to engage in arguments about, well, you know, Aries is where it's at, or Oxcom is where it's at, or some other thing. This is not an either or, folks. This is an all of the above needs to get stronger. Because quite frankly, if we don't do that, a lot of people who are committed to this hobby are going to lose interest and they're going to go somewhere else, and we can't afford that right now. It's really important that we encourage all the people that want to do things in amateur radio, no matter what that is, as long as it's legal and technically sound, to do their thing. And we need to help. League needs to be about helping everybody, not about picking winners. Okay. Other questions or comments? Anything at all? All right. If not, I think my time is up. Peter and I will be up in the log cabin. Peter has a wonderful display and some free stuff that you all can get, copies of On the Air magazine and other publications. And we got more information about what the ADs are doing. So please come up and visit us and talk to us. And thank you for being ARRL members. We really appreciate it.